Welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
Pat, how you doing?
I am doing well, Kurt. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you're over at UHC, UnitedHealthcare.
Yeah.
What do you do over there? You're the chief head VP of products and innovation. You basically cover the whole gamut, right?
Sure. Yes, exactly. Maybe a little bit more narrow than that, but okay. Yes,
Tell me about
absolutely.
It. So what's your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm over at UnitedHealthcare, over product and innovation, really focusing on our commercial line of business. Okay. So not the Medicare, Medicaid side, but really focusing on telehealth. But I think prior to that is really the interesting piece. I was leading up some of our innovation side of the house on our technology side, looking at the latest and greatest from a tech innovation standpoint, and how can we apply this really cool stuff to healthcare?
Yeah, so when people generally think of healthcare, I mean, a lot of times they just think of insurance, right? And UnitedHealthcare, insurance, right? But there's so much more to the work that's done there. It's very holistic, right?
Oh, very, very much so. I mean, if we look at the culture of the company, one of the big culture values is innovation. And how do we bake innovation then into the healthcare piece? It's to your point. It's not just insurance. Mm-hmm. Insurance is a piece of our business, but it's a lot more than that. How do we help our members stay healthy? Mm-hmm. How do we really work within the system, the healthcare system overall too? But then more importantly, how do we keep pressing the envelope and keep striving for innovation?
Sure. So, and not to jump ahead too much, but I'm really interested that, I mean, it's such a highly regulated industry, and I'm just going to jump right into it, I guess. How do you find innovation in that sort of regulated industry? How do you approach it?
Right. And I think there's a couple of ways, and it's a great question. For us, it's first of all looking at the landscape of innovation. Okay. So as we look 10 years ahead plus, we're doing the research already to say, what could be potentially applied to healthcare, right? How do we prove out artificial intelligence is really something that's going to be worthwhile, or IoT, the device side of things. Mm-hmm. How do we look at other things like genomics, especially genomics? That could be a very powerful thing when it comes to healthcare. So we look at these things well ahead of time and say, can we fit this into our portfolio? Okay. The other thing too is we have the sense of innovation within the house as far as within the four walls that we want to drive for this. We have ideas of where we want to drive for this. But to your point, we are highly regulated.
You gotta be careful, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of landmines to step on.
There is, but I think
it's healthcare, right? So you've got personally identifiable data, you've got all this stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have to be very sensitive to that. In fact, that's really one of our highest goals, is to keep everyone's data private and secure, right? I don't want my information about, if I'm going through cancer treatment or anything else, I don't want it to go out to the Googles of the world, and then all of a sudden I'm getting these ads for some unique things where I never went for that before. Mm-hmm. So that privacy really is utmost important. But to your point, though, is how do we strive for innovation in a highly regulated area? And the research is one. But the other things, too, is that we're working with our ventures companies now that are actually getting into the startup realm. Mm-hmm. Who is it that we can start investing in as future partners potentially in the world of healthcare? So we have a lot of very nimble startup companies out there that have really some unique capabilities. Okay. Can we start investing in that now? It
doesn't have to be just in the four walls of the main campus, right?
Not at all. We have to go outside. If we're going to be quick, it can't be solely internal.
Right. Yeah, because, I mean, again, that's where I've seen a lot of problems in the innovation space happen because, so put the regulation stuff over here, but now you've got the company culture over here, and you're being squeezed in between. So for you, Pat, how have you found success? You've obviously been doing this for a while, and how have you found success in kind of balancing that act with building channels into the business to find problems to solve, while still keeping an eye on what's happening on the regulation standpoint? What are the Amazons and Googles doing in the healthcare space, right? Yep. You're kind of literally in the Venn diagram. You're in the middle, going, because, I mean, again, it's not like you're just doing the same old core business stuff on a day-to-day basis, but you're not a startup person. You're not living outside of the four walls, right? Yep. So you're kind of in the middle. How do you find success in navigating those channels?
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent way of putting that here. How do you navigate it? Yeah. Because it becomes very complex. I think there's a couple of means by doing that. First and foremost, we serve a lot of different employers, a lot of different clients that are out there today. So having our ear down on the street and listening to the pulse of the members, what is it that they want? How do they want it? How do we want to meet them when it comes to healthcare? Mm-hmm. So one of the things we've been doing is working very diligently with our sales teams.
Oh, sure.
They're front and center with our clients all the time. They understand the intricacies, the brand, the different industries, right? We're serving financial, retail, manufacturing, you name it, we're serving it. Well, each one wants it a little bit different.
See, it's funny you mention that because I've said it on this show before, is that I believe that in a lot of organizations, sales kind of can lead innovation efforts because they're hearing what people want. And I've always said this to people, like, if you want your company to change, first make your customers want the change to happen, and then your company will. Don't just be this arbiter of change walking in and going, I've got a great idea. You've got to have validation. And that, I'm guessing that sales team can really help you validate a lot of those core ideas that you want to push forward.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's we can go out with a lens of we're going to have an innovation discussion with our clients at a forum, if it's at their site, and we're going to just say, all right, what do you think of this? And go through that diligence of going down different journeys, different paths. What would a consumer do? How would you like it? And we can get all that feedback, and then you can start shaping it, right? You have that Play-Doh sitting in front of you that's unshaped right now, and now we can start forming that into what we think that solution could be, and then come back and test it.
Yeah. And then, I mean, a lot of people, when they think of innovators or things like that, they're thinking of some sort of guy in a lab coat in a white room, like testing things and all this stuff. But what I'm hearing you say, and this is what, I mean, I think most modern companies are doing, they're going straight out to do the research ahead of time before bother building stuff and coming up with their own ideas. It's like an echo chamber in some of these organizations, right?
Yeah, exactly. We are not doing this in a black box. and we've done it in a black box before, like many industries have before, and we failed. So we do have to have the mind of the consumer front and center as we look at this.
Yeah. So Pat, like in building teams that can think like that can work in that type of environment, right? Because again, it's like attracting talent, especially innovative talent, into a large organization can be challenging at times. I've heard a lot of leaders tell me they have a hard time finding the right people, and it could be they don't want to work in the insurance field. It could be they don't want to work for a giant organization. But how have you found success in sourcing great people at UHC for your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where you have to look outside the box, I think, to your point, which is I don't, when we look for individuals of talent, it's not necessarily that they're coming from an insurance industry background per se. We don't want to have somebody, so deep in claims management as an example, as sexy as that is.
I love claims. You said the magic words there, Pat. I'm very excited about claims management.
Exactly.
Me and underwriting, we go way back.
But I think you look at the individual here, and it's a funny case in point because I look at my career as part of that too. Mm-hmm. So before coming into this area of innovation, I was in the area of data security. Mm-hmm. Talk about regulated and very focused in how you have to look at. Yep. But you wanted to get out and try to be creative, and you couldn't necessarily because there were certain restrictions that you had to adhere to.
Yep.
More so. But as we look at individuals there, it's really of what the person can bring to it, not necessarily their background or their experience per se. So I'll give you a great example. I didn't do some of our early on hiring per se, but I was working with these individuals here that we hired one individual, happened to be for some of our gaming initiatives that we were looking at here from a healthcare standpoint. Mm-hmm. Well, her background was retail as a personal shopper and an artist, but it had that creativity to really bring a unique skill set to the job that you couldn't necessarily hire within.
Yeah, so you couldn't just go off of the resume and be like, oh, yeah, well, not a good fit. They don't have a 4-year degree and they don't have experience in underwriting.
Right.
And all this. So how are they going to help us, right? Yeah, because I think that, like you said, being able to not only think that way, but also being able to have the ability to flex like that in an organization like that. Because I'm guessing, as an innovator, you're building these channels into other parts of the business in order to say, like, I can help you solve these problems.
Right.
What are some ways that you found that work to build those channels? I ask it of everybody who works in innovation in a large company on this show. How have you found success building those channels into the business to say, like, hey, we're here to help solve some of your biggest challenges?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Clients, right?
They are. It's back to a little bit on that sales side there, right? It's kind of hearing what do the employers have to say, but then it's going to the underwriters of the world to say, we have a problem over here with claims management. It's not innovative enough. Well, I don't know if it ever will be, but
sure.
But of course, it's getting with the experts then and bringing them into the room to hear this as well here too, because I think for us, we tend to be very narrow in the way that we think about it here, just from a general industry standpoint. We think we can fix within, and that's not always going to be the case. So we partner with these unique individuals that we're bringing in from a talent standpoint. Mm-hmm. We set them with a subject matter expert, and then we go together to listen to our consumers, and there we can now strike some really good balance when it comes to generating ideas, right? Because you have that subject matter experts to say, oh, I didn't even think about it this way, and you have these unique individuals that are looking at this from a different lens saying, what do you think about doing this, or this? And you can really bounce these ideas off of one another and start coming up with some really valid conceptual solutions.
But what do you do if they say, we don't have a problem? Is it you just bringing in people that have the problem and stand them in front of them and say, no, listen to these people, they have a problem? Because I can imagine that, again, I've seen this in large organizations before where you have these groups, they're like, we've been operating this way for a long time. Yep. What's the problem? Like, sure, there's always going to be a problem with the way that people contact us or something. Like, there's no way to fix that. Or, you know what I mean? Like, why do I need to focus on what I'm doing in my job, not your harebrained scheme, Pat? Like, how do you break through that? Yeah,
you have to bring validity in regards to maybe it's not a problem, but it's an opportunity instead. I think in how you frame it with these individuals here, right? You mentioned it earlier. You have the Amazons of the world that are coming in. They're poking holes in all kinds of things when you look at it from a healthcare standpoint. Mm-hmm. Well, they're going to do some things very unique. You look at other groups like Oscar Health as an example, very forward-thinking online group when it comes to insurance. They're doing things much different. And guess what? That's going to have impact on us here. So how do we take a look at these opportunities now to say, you know what? There may not be a problem what we do today, but how can we do it better? How can we do it faster, right? How can we use the world of technology and innovation to do something different that's going to help our members?
So how does it work in that side? You're over here and they're over there. Are they coming? Have you built a channel where they come to you and present problems and say, we need to fix this? Or are you more so actively going into each of those business units as you're discovering things and saying, here are ways we can innovate? Which way does it work best for you?
It's a great question because I've seen it both ways.
Yeah, I've seen it both ways too.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the mindset of the group here too. So we've seen it where we've had groups both on our clinical side and our pharmacy side come to us and say, you know what, here's a problem we think. Can you help us validate it? Okay. But then also, can we start driving some solutioning behind that? Mm-hmm. But there are things that we may go out and see that there's opportunities on with other areas of healthcare and bring it to that line of business to say, we've been seeing a lot around this area here. What do you think? Is this a problem? Is this an area that you want to explore? And again, either way have brought us success in driving innovation.
Let me ask you, I want to get into the nitty-gritty side of it because, so when you're going to there, are you bringing like a formal presentation saying, here's the opportunities and you're presenting to a group? Is this like you're having a conversation in the cafeteria? Like, how are you finding the best way to come in and say, we found these things, business unit, and we want to present them to you and have you do something about it?
Yeah, I think honestly, the approach I've seen is more the casual approach, which is let's sit down with a contact that you have over at a pharmacy group as an example here. Sit down, have a cup of coffee. Let's just go and talk through what we think it is here. And then if they bite on it and say, you know what, this is really interesting. Let's talk more. Let's formalize this a little bit more. Then you can start going to those conversations. But the casual approach has always been something I've preferred, but I think also seems to be the best way of getting it forward.
Yeah, because I've seen people do it both ways, right? Depending on the company culture, right? Is like, well, you know, the piece to it is that personal connection, that building of trust, right? Where it's like, no, actually, Pat's not here to replace your job. He's here to help you make your job better, right?
Right. And that, and that's an excellent point here too, is that we are their partner in crime. We are not here to substitute them, to do something different, to get rid of their jobs. We're not bringing in the robots to automate it.
Right.
Maybe.
So let me throw out a statement here, because I think even in almost more so in healthcare than a lot of other places, a lot of people, and I've heard this quote used before, is like, by the time you come up with the best solution, the problem's changed. Right. So many companies have this kind of culture of doneness about them, right? Where it's like, we finished it, we're done, and we move on, right? But in this world of innovation, you're never done, right? Because the problem is always changing, right? Like you said, 10 years ago, Amazon probably wasn't on the radar, you know, of a thing, right? And telemedicine, I think, has been around for a long time, but in its current form, the way that I've at least experienced it, or the partners that we've worked with in telemedicine here at Foundry, has been really unique. Everything from Snapchat for telehealth, you know, like just crazy, fun and interesting challenges and problems. But how do you stay on top of what's happening out there personally? Are you a big reader? Do you go to a lot of conferences? How do you personally stay on top of like what's happening in the innovation healthcare space? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, the nice thing is when you have a nice, strong network of people, we always love to shoot articles around to one another. Okay. Hey, have you seen this? Have you seen that? Could have been Pew. It could have been JD Power. It could be Advisory Board. I mean, there's so many different periodicals, blogs, other things out there as well, too, to keep your finger on the pulse. Yeah. And that's important. And I love it that actually our company does what we call a daily dose, which is essentially it's a collaboration of a bunch of articles coming together on a daily basis to say, here's what's important that you may want to learn more about.
Oh, and somebody curates that, and
exactly,
that's really cool.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Yeah, it is, and you scan through that every day, and you go, oh, you know what? I haven't heard of this one before. Let me now start reading that, right? And then you can then bring that and distribute it to whomever is as well within the network. Mm-hmm. But the other thing, you have the conferences. Conferences are great from the standpoint that you can start networking and meeting new individuals. But I think more importantly is keeping up with those individuals then.
Because you're learning more from the individuals than the actual conference, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it. And you look at a conference and you look at the agenda and who's speaking and all that stuff. There may be nuggets you're going to pull out of that, of course. But yeah, it is definitely the networking.
But the longer lasting piece, because people say that to me all the time, like, oh, I hate conferences. And it's like, well, you're not doing conferences right then.
Right.
Because conferences are our opportunity to meet and connect with those like-minded individuals, right?
Right.
And share ideas.
Exactly, because how many times have you gone to a conference and most of the conversations have been hallway conversations or afterwards or breakfast meetings, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where you gain
I've been to conferences where I don't even remember who spoke at them. Just, not because of the free open bar, but mostly because of the conversations,
Yeah.
It's been fantastic.
Right.
What are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing on the horizon that need to be addressed in the healthcare industry?
Oh, wow. There's a lot of things really coming into the healthcare industry
let's
here.
Focus on the technology aspect of it. From the technology aspect, not just... Obviously, we could get in the whole pharmaceutical side of things, but that's not what you do. You're not creating new drugs. You're not that kind of innovator.
No,
right?
we're not, yes, correct.
But from a technology standpoint, what are some of the biggest challenges you feel like these organizations are going to be facing over the next few years?
Right now, you're seeing a lot of of evolution in regards to new devices coming out to help monitor individuals. It could be anything from diabetes to weight loss to a variety of other things that are out there today.
Pushing into that.
Apple is pushing into that, but of course, then we are seeing some of the things in regards to like Fitbit and Google coming together now, right?
Right.
So Apple and Ascension, the hospital system, right? It just had a big write-up in regards to they're sharing data. Now we can look at it two ways here. In that, well, is there some privacy concerns? I'm sure there is.
Always is.
Secondarily, though, they found, if I remember right, just under 1% of that population that they were monitoring had AFib from a health condition standpoint. So now can you say, is that really intrusion of privacy, or is that now helping me? Right? So there's a lot of now unique ways of thinking about that here, too.
Yeah, it depends on your perspective, right? Because it's like Google and Facebook saying, well, we got your data so we can serve you more relevant ads.
Right.
Well, we got your personal data so we can stop you from having a stroke.
Yeah. and if you can tell me I'm going to stop, from getting a stroke, and you're showing me a couple ads at the same time, fine. Show me the ads.
I'll take it.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of folks out there who think that these sorts of things are just the gateway drug, if you will, to much more like a Cambridge Analytica type of scandal in healthcare. You know what I mean, right?
Right.
That would be pretty devastating.
It would be, but I think at the same time now, let's take that a step further. And yes, you may have the big companies like the Fitbit and the Apples collecting your data, but now what if I can make it relevant and send it to your doctor? And now your doctor is reading not necessarily the raw data, but more or less the readings to say, here's some anomalies. Now I need to engage with Kurt because now I see some information that as a doctor, I should probably get in front of.
Yeah, and that's where I could see also being a whole nother challenge right on top of it because, I'm not trying to be stereotypical. Doctors don't want to learn a lot of new stuff. They spend 8, 12, 15, 30 years in school.
Yeah.
And we work a lot with healthcare startups. And I would say the biggest challenges is getting these doctors to try something new and new technology. And no matter what the benefit is, right? Because their mind space is so filled up with what they already currently are doing.
Right.
They don't really have a lot of space in their brains to say, all right, now I'm going to learn this new app that's going to do this thing, right?
Right.
We work with a healthcare startup that built an app for doctors, and nobody downloaded it because the feedback was the doctors were like, I don't want to download apps. Like, just send me a link or something, Yep. And so we ended up helping them transform this app into a web-based progressive web app, and it worked out great.
Yeah.
But do you see that in the work that you're doing is like, okay, well, I got this through the regulation, I got this through the business, and now
how do we get it to the doctor?
Yes, right.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, that's a key piece, obviously, right? And so what we're doing is exactly what you had stated there. It's not let's not take them out of their workflow to go out to a new app or anything else like that. Let's integrate it into their workflow. So again, after listening to the doctors, well, they have this electronic medical system that they're working in. Can we integrate it into there and now make it more usable for them? Those are the things that we're starting to do, because you're right. Adaptability is huge on the provider side.
Yeah, because you can come up with the best idea, but if nobody uses it, then how great was that idea?
Exactly. Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about the telehealth stuff. I'm really interested in that because I feel like so many people are trying to solve this problem in so many different ways.
Yeah.
There's a ton of healthcare startups out there that are built on this idea.
Yep.
And like you said, you not only are you focused on the idea of building your own stuff, but mergers and acquisitions also can help, right?
Oh yeah,
being able to
partnerships,
right? Yeah, being able to partner or just buy instead of build, right?
Yep.
So how do you in that space kind of determine buy versus build? Do you have a philosophy around that? Is there a way that you prefer to work, or is it just what's the problem?
Yeah. Again, great question. There's a number of ways that we go about this here, but I think primarily because of speed to market now, especially in the area of telehealth, you're going to find that it's partnership or acquisition that's going to get you there faster typically than a build. Are there certain things that we can do with a build to better integrate it? Absolutely. So I think you're going to find a combination of that.
Got it.
So if we partner with a group that has a great solution, now let's build that bridge, that pipe to get the member experience to be the best.
Okay. Yeah, because like you were saying, once it once it's something that's real, now you want to get it into the workflow that these care providers are in without making it more work for them, right? Trying to make less work for them, right?
Exactly. Easier the better.
Easier the better. So what's one solution on that tail end? We talked a lot about the front end stuff. Let's say you've launched something, you've done this integration. How are ways that you stay on top of, again, this culture of doneness, right? It's never done. Now it's out in the wild. You've got this telehealth product that's being used. Like, what are ways that you stay on top of how successful it's being? How do you measure? What have you seen work well for you?
There's a ton of ways that we start looking at measures of success through KPIs, right? Key performance indicators here. So let's look at things very simple like utilization. How often are members using it? Are they registering? Are they actually going through visits? Things like that, right? Those are what I would call just the foundation pieces of it there. Okay. But then it's going out and actually surveying our members. We do NPS, Net Promoter Score, on a lot of our stuff. And so we do measure that. Now, knock on wood, telehealth is actually the top digital NPS driver, which is fantastic.
That's great.
But can we do better? Absolutely.
We can always do better.
Yes. In fact, J.D. Power just told us that recently, that we can do better.
Really? They like to tell people that. That's kind of their MO, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about also how you supplement and work with other outside groups, these partners and things, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing at the size that UnitedHealthcare is at, I mean, you have access to the McKinseys and the Forresters and Gardners and all these things. How do you know when it's right to look outside the walls for that kind of help? Is it just spending the time researching what the problem is, or do you immediately say like, nope, we shouldn't try and solve this ourselves. We should either bring in a partner, or we should go and find a startup that's working on this. Like, you could just go on forever, right? Just trying to solve the problem. How do you know when it's right to bring in outside forces? Yeah,
I think some of that is just going to be early on research that we can do, right? It's back to your point. How can we get to the McKinseys, the Pews, and plus we have our own internal research teams to say, all right, we think we have a problem here, and it's based on not only what the members are saying, but also what the data is saying as well, too, from a claim standpoint,
those
right?
Could be two different stories, right?
Those could be yes, but they can be the same as well, too, right? But then we make that quick determination to say, all right, here's the problem, here's how we frame it up here. Is that something that we have accessible internally? If not, we're going outside to find a partner and see what the landscape is. Who's the best one out there that we could pull in? Partnership, we can look at acquisition. There's a number of things we can do then.
Sure. That's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about we're wrapping up here, your journey, Pat. Let's say I'm listening to this show and I'm also interested in innovation, right? You, Pat, went from IT and security, now are working in this innovation field. Like, how did you make that determination and then feel like this, I would feel successful and safe making this transition? And what kind of drove that for you?
Yeah. It was really interesting. There's a lot of things that come into this, right? It's all part of networking and who you know and how they're selling the position to you as well, too. Okay. But for me, I just happened to have dropped into the role here. I've always been, have a deep interest in innovation, where we're going. Back in the early 2000s, was part of e-commerce at a retail organization, right? So they kind of gave me the flavor of, ooh, this is really kind of neat. How do I continue to pursue this here? So I've always kept a finger on the pulse there. But, for me is just making that jump and saying, you know what? For me, this was the time in my career to do something different and to really get out and stretch myself. I didn't have a background in innovation other than, a couple of things I've done previously. Not to the point where we're working with startups or anything else like that. It's also working with some really key individuals that I saw as leaders within the organization, not just from general leadership.
Or the title.
It was all about, they were creative. They were looking outside the box. They were doing something different. They were pushing the envelope. I wanted to be a part of that. And making that jump was just so much easier, and having those role models in place to help grow where I'm at today. So it's looking at those opportunities to say, who are the leaders I really want to follow?
That's really smart, because I've seen that work for lots of other people, right? It's kind of, they say, like, you are the equivalent of like your 5 closest friends or something like that, right? It's similar in a business. this, right? Is that if you're hanging out and communing with the most innovative and charismatic and the networking type leaders, I mean, you're naturally going to kind of fall into that group. You're also going to, your confidence level is going to go up, right?
Yep.
You're going to feel like, oh, I have something to say, and people would actually listen.
Right.
Right? Because now you've got those peers who have kind of even forged that path ahead of you a little bit. You can use that stuff. You can use them to bounce these ideas and things off before you go and stick your foot in your mouth later, right?
Exactly. Yes. But even more so is that you have the confidence, or you're gaining that confidence then, and then eventually you'll become that leader then too, where others are going to respond to you. And then it gets back to your earlier question on talent. Mm-hmm. How can you then bring in the right talent? If you have that drive and that passion, now that experience, you can really help hone in and bring the right people into the organization too.
Yeah, because now you've got even a wider view, I guess I would say, right?
Exactly.
It's not just this, whatever my title is, and in that, right? Because
exactly.
I see that happen in a lot of organizations, right? You get that title, you work there, and you just kind of like lock the blinders on and go, because this is what you've been told to do,
right?
And don't step outside of those lines. And it's usually, it's not your boss or your peers holding you back. It's just you, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Right.
And so how did you sort of get that confidence? Was it ingrained from those other leaders you were working with? Is it, your own kind of personal philosophy towards your career trajectory and your growth, right? Like what drives Pat, to keep moving up like this?
I've always had a very high bar on myself in regards to performance. I always want to perform at the best level possible. And if not, I want to get that absolutely clear feedback on what I can do to improve, right? Mm-hmm. It's that self-awareness. And I think that's the one thing I've always been personally good at, self-awareness, and understanding where are my true weak spots and where are my true strengths, and how do I soar with that while improving my weaknesses then.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that you touched on there that I hear a lot of people who have frustrations with in organizations they work with. They're not getting feedback.
Yep.
They're not getting that constructive criticism, or whatever term people want to use for this. How have you found success in getting that? Because number one, like, we're in Minnesota, people don't like confrontation, and a lot of organizations are not good at that sort of business, so, of giving back that critical feedback where you need it. How have you found success in getting that from your leadership?
I think there's a couple of ways there. First of all, it's just asking outright, simply, and asking for that clear feedback. Sometimes you're going to get it, sometimes you're not. But I think the other thing too is that I make mistakes. I'm human, and making those mistakes drives naturally feedback associated with that. I'm not saying I'm making a mistake on purpose to get feedback, but you're using that as a lesson learned too,
right? Instead of burying it, right?
Exactly.
And trying to gloss over it, right? It's an opportunity to now get that feedback, right?
Right, because I don't want that feedback once a year on my annual performance review. I want that when it comes. I want it real time. That's how I can make my personal change.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. Again, like, you've got I see too many people waiting for leadership to make the move on the feedback front, but you got to go after it, right?
Absolutely. If not, then you're not going to know.
Because you think they're walking around thinking, boy, how can I give Pat some feedback today? It's not. They're not doing that, are they?
No, not at all.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah.
It'd be so much easier. Then I could just get back to work.
Right. But, the other thing that I found, which is interesting, is not just going and say, give me feedback. It's, I went through the scenario and I made a mistake. What did I do wrong? How can I improve upon that? Right? It's making it more scenario based to help them then
bring in a narrative.
Bring in a narrative and say, here's what I think you could have done.
Right. Instead of just walking in, what do you think I could do better?
Exactly.
And then they're like, I don't know, use your turn signals more. I don't I don't know. I mean, it could be anything, right?
Exactly.
But like, to your point, though, if you're bringing in, because I've used this and people who listen to the show will be ad nauseum about this, but I've always said, don't ask for feedback, ask for advice, because feedback is something that you can't really address because it's already happened. It's post tense information, right?
Yep.
You can't really do anything. But advice, and again, every time I say this, people are like, I shouldn't take advice from everybody. No, what I'm saying is like being very deliberate with your ask for advice.
Yes.
And saying, just to your point, this thing happened to me. What would you have done in that situation versus what could I do better? Or, that can come later, but like first starting with what's their position and how can I learn from their position and then apply it to the next time, right?
Exactly.
Because I've definitely had those moments where I've came back and I said, well, I tried it your way and that didn't work either.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now we both learned.
Yeah, exactly. It's feedback for them as well, too. That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
We both learned.
Right, exactly. It's an opportunity. Well, Pat, I always enjoy our conversation, so I thank you so much for taking the time to come down.
Thanks, Kurt.
Today. It was really great. So if I want to connect with Pat and maybe, ask him what next conference he's going to so I can chat him up about innovation, like where's a great place to find you and connect with you?
Yeah, from a social standpoint, I think I'm very active on LinkedIn right now. So you just look up my name up there, and I'm happy to connect with you.
Great. Well, Pat, I want to thank you again for joining us on the show.
Appreciate it, Kurt. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to The Schmidt List. If you want to learn more about how Foundry accelerates innovation, check out foundrymakes.com. And if you'd like me to speak about establishing a growth mindset at your conference or with your team, drop me a note at kurt@foundrymakes.com. Oh, and the next time you're on the internet, head to iTunes and leave the show a review. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, because sharing is caring. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show, and I hope you have a fantastic week.